sometime in early 2026, daily life became significantly more expensive. You likely noticed it first at the pump, where gas prices climbed past $4.27, or at checkout as shipping surcharges on common goods spiked by 25%. This sudden inflation is known as a geopolitical risk premium. It's an extra cost added to global logistics when markets react to instability, forcing every link in the supply chain to charge more just to account for the danger of moving goods. Disclaimer: the following analysis is constructed from public records, reported data, and observable patterns. Some interpretations are analytical in nature and may challenge official narratives. Viewer discretion is advised. Welcome to Twisted Plots, where the story isn't what you're told, it's what doesn't make sense. You're not here for headlines, you're here for what's underneath them, because this isn't just a story, it's a system. This specific premium was triggered on February 28, 2026. On that day, the United States and Israel initiated Operation Epic Fury, a massive coordinated campaign of aerial bombardment and precision strikes against Iran. While planners promised a surgical high-tech operation, the public assumption of a clean victory ignored the immediate financial shockwaves. Within days, the localized conflict began siphoning capital from the global economy. Between February 28th and March 5th, unbudgeted military outlays exceeded $11.3 billion, a daily burn rate of $2.1 billion. This eclipsed the daily spending peaks of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, representing the most expensive period of military operations in the post-9/11 era. By the end of the first month, the total direct expenditure reached $27.5 billion. While the daily rate slowed as the military moved past its initial strikes, the cumulative bill continued to climb as regional damage and platform losses were factored in.
The speed of this expenditure creates a unique fiscal pressure. Operation Epic Fury demonstrates that the financial intensity of modern precision warfare can outpace even the most robust military budgets in a matter of weeks. The primary driver of these costs is the reliance on exquisite munitions. These are highly advanced GPS-guided weapons designed for surgical accuracy, but they are also some of the most expensive items in the U.S. arsenal. Consider the Tomahawk cruise missile. U.S. forces fired over 300 of these in just the first 144 hours of the conflict. At an estimated unit cost of $3.5 million, that single weapon system accounted for $1.2 billion of the initial bill. Defense is equally expensive. Intercepting Iranian retaliatory strikes required systems like THAAD and the SM-3 interceptor. A single SM-3 launch can cost up to $5 million, and the initial wave of missile defense added another $5.7 billion to the total. This rapid consumption creates a strategic bottleneck. Expending 319 Tomahawks in 1 week utilized nearly 10% of the Navy's total global inventory, leaving fewer resources available for other potential theaters in the Pacific or Europe. To replenish these stockpiles, the Pentagon requested a $200 billion supplemental funding package from Congress. It's a massive figure intended to reboot production lines for a conflict with no clear end in sight. While that request stalls in Congress, the military is forced into reprogramming, shifting existing funds meant for training, maintenance, and personnel welfare to cover the immediate cost of the bombs being dropped in Iran. This chart shows the domestic landscape that makes that $200 billion request so controversial. Healthcare now consumes 1 out of every $5 in the U.S. economy. Since 1999, worker health insurance premiums have surged by 308%, growing nearly 3 times faster than wages. The 2027 budget proposal highlights the trade-off. It requests a historic $1.5 trillion for defense, while simultaneously proposing a 12.5% cut to the Department of Health and Human Services, reducing funding for medical research and public welfare. This illustrates the Duns versus Butter crisis. Funding the extreme hardware requirements of modern war requires a direct reduction in the resources available for domestic welfare.
This financial strain isn't limited to the U.S. All primary stakeholders are reaching a fiscal breaking point as the war shifts from tactical strikes to economic attrition. Israel's economy is under severe pressure, losing approximately $3 billion every week. The mobilization of hundreds of thousands of reservists has damaged national productivity, pushing the country's deficit target from 3.9% toward a much riskier 5.5% of GDP in Iran. The situation is a systemic collapse. Strikes have destroyed 66% of its drone and missile production sites. On the ground, the rial has entered a hyperinflationary spiral. Food prices have surged by 105%, leaving basic staples like bread and meat unaffordable for many families. With infrastructure failing in Iran and budgets buckling in the US and Israel, the conflict has become a test of who can survive the mounting economic costs the longest.
Although the physical combat is contained within West Asia, the financial burden is globally distributed. The war is being paid for by people who will never see the front lines. This distribution happens through the Strait of Hormuz. The Testis choke point handles 20% of the world's oil. Iran's soft closure of the waterway created an immediate global energy shock, sending crude prices as high as $126 a barrel. The result is a Hormuz tax applied to every global consumer. Forecasts for 2026 global GDP growth have already been revised downward as the world economy adjusts to higher costs for fuel, electricity, and transport. From the gas pump to the grocery aisle, global citizens are the ultimate financiers of the conflict. The geopolitical risk premium is the price they pay for an escalation that is no longer regionally contained. This globalized cost is creating deep internal resistance. In Washington, fiscal conservatives are openly challenging the $200 billion supplemental request, questioning the strategic wisdom of writing a blank check while domestic constituents face a cost of living crisis. Public sentiment has shifted alongside these costs. Over 50% of the Americans now oppose military action against Iran, with a vast majority demanding the government prioritize lowering healthcare costs over continuing military operations abroad. The 2026 war on Iran shows that the limit of a superpower isn't just its technology, but its domestic budget. When the cost of a foreign war forces a direct reduction in a nation's own healthcare and stability, the political pressure at home becomes a force that military dominance cannot control.
For 80 years, American influence was the default setting for the global economy, the international media narrative, and the world's major military theaters. That status quo was tested by the resurrection of the maximum pressure campaign. The administration promised a surgical operation against Tehran, a display of force that would reset the Middle East without requiring a single American boot on the ground. The opening salvos immediately exceeded those narrow constraints. Instead of a swift reset, the missile strikes ignited a massive uncontrolled escalation that the original policy was never designed to contain. As the conflict spread, the damage moved from the Persian Gulf to the American balance sheet. The real threat wasn't the external force of the Iranian military, but the internal rot of a system that had overextended its own resources. By April 2026, the United States was facing a triple bankruptcy, a total exhaustion of its moral, financial, and diplomatic credit. While the White House released polished briefings about strategic targets, the world watched raw, unedited footage of the human cost on TikTok and Telegram. Tehran leveraged this information gap. They successfully framed the conflict as an act of imperialist ego, a vanity war that prioritized one leader's reputation over international stability. This shift in perception altered the American brand. For the first time in the modern era, the presence of the U.S. military was viewed by the world not as order, but as chaos.
Without the support of a global narrative or public opinion, even the most advanced carrier groups became strategically irrelevant. The physical display of force couldn't overcome the total loss of international credibility. Modern warfare in the 2020s follows a specific, lopsided economic ratio. To maintain a stalemate, the U.S. military was forced to use interceptor missiles costing $2 million each to down a single $20,000 drone. The financial strain worsened when the Strait of Hormuz was closed, choking the global oil supply. Trade routes snapped and redirected to Asia, starving the American economy. Choked supply chains spiked basic goods, pushing gas toward $10 a gallon. The administration's response, printing more money to cover the deficit, devalued the savings of the American middle class. To supply the war machine, funding was drained from infrastructure, diverted from public education, and stripped from healthcare. Internal systems were left to decay, while inflation hit double digits. The campaign ultimately backfired. The true cost wasn't felt by leadership in Tehran, but by American families who could no longer afford basic groceries. The final breaking point for the Atlantic Alliance came when Washington demanded that its allies join the naval blockade. European and Asian partners, unwilling to follow the U.S. into economic ruin, refused. They prioritized their own stability over traditional loyalty to Washington. This great divorce saw long-term allies pivoting their economies toward Beijing and New Delhi, seeking new partners who weren't embroiled in an expensive regional stalemate. The most significant shift occurred in Riyadh, where the cornerstone of American financial influence, the petrodollar, crumbled as Saudi Arabia began settling oil trades in yuan. American global leverage depended on the world's reliance on the dollar. Once that reliance dissolved, the ability to use international sanctions to pressure adversaries became a tool of the past. By the end of 2026, the national debt surpassed $50 trillion. This surge was driven by the massive cost of the war, the interest on emergency bonds, and the collapse of tax revenue as the domestic economy stalled. Leadership remained fixated on a foreign enemy, while the financial and moral foundation of their own country was hollowing out. The decisive moments of the conflict didn't happen in the desert. They happened in central bank boardrooms and in the living rooms of families who were priced out of their own lives. America First resulted in America Alone. When a nation exhausts both its financial credit and its moral credibility, the world moves on without it. The total cost of the conflict serves as the final entry in the ledger of a bankrupt empire.
History rarely remembers the speeches that started a war. It remembers the bills that followed. And long after the missiles stop flying, the debt, the inflation, and the consequences remain. Because the true cost of war is never measured in missiles. It's measured in opportunities lost, futures delayed, and ordinary people paying for decisions they never got to make. And perhaps that's the final lesson. The most devastating weapons in modern warfare aren't always the ones that explode. Sometimes they're the policies, the debts, and the decisions that quietly reshape millions of lives long after the headlines have disappeared. The bombs fall in one country, but the bill arrives everywhere. This is Twisted Plots, and this was the ledger of a bankrupt empire.